Hey, I'm Andrew with 10-Minute Therapy, and we're going to begin today a new series of videos specifically focused around the concept of marriage. As a counselor and therapist, I've had the privilege, the honor, and the opportunity many times over to counsel folks through marital issues. Now, marital issues can range to all sorts of different things from personal traumatic issues to emotional issues to things that just affect every single marriage, like communication. So, for today's video, we're going to start off this topic of marriage by diving into the very fact of marriage simply isn't about you. So let's go ahead and start the clock. We'll get right to it. So today is the first video where we're going to begin to look at the concept in the very specific relationship of marriage. As a counselor who's engaged in a fair deal of marriage counseling, I feel that there are a number of issues that present themselves in marriage that are common to almost all marriages. It's almost saying that there are universal issues that we run into in marriage that we would all benefit from having a better understanding of. So, over the next few videos, we're going to start to break some of those down. Things like communication and intimacy and connectedness, all these things that we have to address in the concept of a marriage relationship. But for today's video, I wanted to start with something that was a little more fundamental, something that's a little bit more foundational, as it were. And that is quite simply taking on the mindset that marriage is not about you. Now, here's the issue that we find ourselves in. We live in a culture that tells us, you do you, a culture that says, you do what makes you happy. And it's a message that says that life is all about me and what I want to pursue in my dreams and goals and what makes me happy and what I want to do. And the problem is that this message that runs very deep through our society and has for many, many generations, this message ultimately is very destructive in the relationship of marriage. I think of it like this. If I enter into the union of marriage, a relationship that I am saying I commit myself to love and care for this person for the rest of my life, and yet my mindset, my focus is on what makes me happy and how I want to pursue my goals and my dreams, and I need to do me. Ultimately, what I'm bringing into my marriage is something that is very counterproductive and even destructive in the long run. We hear very often that marriage is about compromise. Marriage is 50-50. You meet in the middle, you make compromises. And this doesn't sound bad on the surface when we start to examine it. But ultimately, there's something deeply wrong with that. See, if I approach marriage from this mindset of it being a 50-50 compromise, you get what you want, I get what I want. I've not entered into a covenantal relationship of marriage. I've entered into a contractual vision of marriage. And that version of marriage is ultimately going to be disappointing, even hurtful. So the problem isn't necessarily communication, though that's something we need to address and work on in marriages. The problem isn't necessarily intimacy, though that's certainly something that couples argue and fight about, or maybe how we spend our finances or how we parent our children. These are all relevant topics in marriage, but fundamentally something that lies dormant underneath all of those arguments and discussions is the reality that many of us enter into marriage with a mindset that it's somehow about me. And suddenly, when I find myself in this marriage relationship years down the road and I don't feel happy and I don't feel fulfilled, and I hear this societal message that says, you do you, you go make you happy, then I ultimately come to the conclusion that the only way to be happy is to leave my marriage. That the only way to do me is to leave and pursue some other thing that I find fulfilling. And so we see that the marriage covenant is often destroyed and ruined by a message in society that says this is about you and you need to make it about you. So, what I'm going to propose today is that we do a couple things in order to move into an idea that a healthy marriage is simply not about me. So, one thing that we have to consider, if marriage isn't about me, then what is it about? If we're defining this relationship that is unique amongst all other human relationships, if we're going to define this marriage relationship and we're saying it's not about me, and maybe it's not about my personal happiness, it's not about compromise and about this 50-50 idea. I think these are all fallacies that we've bought into in society, but they quite frankly don't lead to a happy, fulfilling, healthy marriage. So then ultimately, what is marriage about? If I were going to define it by putting one term or one word to it, I would say this: marriage is about humility, selflessness, sacrifice. These are all words that we could sort of hinge all of marriage on. But I would argue if I was going to put one word out there, I would stick with the word humility. Marriage is about humility. What does humility mean? Well, we know that it's the opposite of pride. It's the opposite of focusing on myself. Humility actually lays itself down for the other. And I'm going to make the argument that in order to have a healthy or a fulfilling marriage, what we need to be able to do is to lay ourselves down for the other person. What we need to be able to do is consider the other person's needs above our own. See, here again, the societal message that says marriage is about happiness, marriage is about compromise, that it's about me, that I need to do what's best for me. The problem with that message is that inevitably in a marriage, I will reach a point where I don't feel happy. I don't feel fulfilled. I don't feel that this is working for me. And that message that says I need to do what's best for me is going to lead me selfishly to leave and go pursue my own wants and desires. My dear listeners, hear me clearly. That road leads to depression. Any road we take that is about a full focus and a pursuit of our own wants and needs leads inevitably towards depression. Because the truth is, life just isn't about pursuing my own wants and desires. It is very much about relationships and connection and how we love and care and serve others. So in marriage, we get this opportunity quite frequently, if we're honest. Marriage is not an easy relationship. It is not always sunshine and roses. Though Facebook would have us believe that marriages look great on the outside and people are always smiling in pictures and couples are always off doing these amazing things. The truth is, behind those photos and behind closed doors, marriages struggle because there is something in us that when we are that vulnerable with another person, when we struggle with another person for long enough, all of our inner parts are sort of exposed. All of our parts are shown. There's nothing hidden. This person knows me intimately, vulnerably, and that makes us uncomfortable. And what do we do with that at that point? That's the part we have to figure out. And so I'm going to argue here today, marriage is not about you. It is quite frankly about humility. It's about service. It's about loving the other. Down the road a bit, we're going to look at communication in marriage and why one of the missing ingredients, one of the most important things that we find missing in marriages all over the world, but especially here in America, is something as simple as listening. So how do you take one step today towards making your marriage not about you, but about the other person? I would argue one of the best ways you can do that is by taking on listening. What if we were all slower to speak and quicker to listen? How many less arguments would we have in our marriages? How many less disagreements or fights? How much more peace would there be if we were fast to listen and to listen well and slow to speak and put out our own opinions and thoughts? That kind of humility is something that may not be natural in the human heart, but it is something we can practice. We'll look at that more in our video on communication. What if marriage stopped being about what I want and instead I considered the wants and desires of my spouse? What if I considered my spouse's wants and desires as greater than my own? How many less arguments, how many fewer disagreements, and how much more peace and joy would there be in a marriage if I stopped fighting for what I want and started caring for what my spouse wants and desires? And how would that change the heart of my spouse if I made my focus caring for them and compassionately listening to them and considering their wants and needs? How might my spouse's heart change in love in return? You see, so often I think that marriages reach a boiling point. They reach a breaking point. And oftentimes couples walk into my office for a marriage session, and it's very similar to two boxers who have been in a ring for many, many rounds. They've been dealing punches back and forth, body shots, head shots, cheap shots. And they walk in, and now both of these boxers are standing in their corners, staring the other one down, waiting for the next one to move. And they get in this stalemate, and they're exhausted, and they're wounded, and they're hurt. But what would happen if one of the boxers took their gloves off, threw them on the ground, and said, "I'm not fighting anymore," and just embraced the other? What would happen in a marriage, even if it was contentious and it felt like it was falling apart and fragile, that there was little left to fight for? What would happen if just one of the two was willing to quit fighting for their own wants and needs, quit fighting to be heard, quit fighting to have things their way, and instead was willing to say, in humility, I'm going to consider the other as greater than myself? What would that do to a marriage? I want you to really think about this today as we close out this video, that maybe, just maybe, our culture's view of marriage has brainwashed and persuaded all of us that somehow it's about me. And maybe I've gone years fighting for what I want and need, fighting for the things that seem important to me, and I had it backwards all along. Maybe marriage isn't about you. It's about loving, caring for, and serving your spouse in humility. So I'm going to encourage you, join us over the next few weeks, over the next few videos. We'll start right off with things like communication and finances and intimacy, and get right into core issues that we know crop up in every marriage from time to time. But all this is going to be built on a foundation that, quite simply, marriage isn't about you. I hope this is beneficial. I hope to see you back and we can dive through this topic together. In the meantime, I'm Andrew with 10 Minute Therapy. God bless.